Good evening, everyone. As Serge says, my name is Paula Kahumbu. I'm Kenyan, born and raised in the city of Nairobi. And I want to say that, coming to this conference was a really difficult decision. I think that it's hard to be positive at a time in the world when so many things are not going well. And it's a huge responsibility to speak about wildlife and conservation when we're not sure about where things are going. Yesterday, we had a wonderful, wonderful keynote from Fred. It was so inspiring, even though he said he wasn't going to stand up here and say, I'm going to inspire you. He obviously did. I'm going to talk to you about several initiatives that I think are really important for Africa. It has a lot to do with many of the topics that have been discussed today and some different topics. We are truly blessed in this continent, and we keep hearing this. We have these extraordinary animals. You guys in the tourism industry, you know that visitors are going to come to Africa in larger and larger numbers to witness these phenomenal spectacles that we have on this continent. And I'm sure that you hear from visitors who come a lot that when they come to Africa, they don't want to leave. They feel so at home. Well, it's not surprising. Africa is the continent where we evolved. We grew up, we evolved with these species, elephants, lions, giraffes, on these landscapes. So of course, we feel calm and relaxed and at home when we're here in Africa. But we take these species for granted, and there are loads and loads of serious challenges that we're facing. The last 2 northern white rhinos, people say to me, oh, they're on the brink of extinction. It's like saying there are 2 grains of sand left in the Sahara. The desert is about to go. No, the species is gone. It's gone. Yesterday, Fred did something very interesting, and I'm going to ask you guys to do the same. He retold his story of when he fell in love with wildlife. I don't know if you guys remember, he talked about going out on safari as an adult. I think he was in his 20s. Fred, are you here? Where's Fred? Fred, did you say you were in your 20s? Yes. He was in his 20s when he first saw his first lions, and he fell in love with wildlife. Fred's entire talk was all about business and enterprise, but actually, you can do business and enterprise on any subject, but he's chosen wildlife as the subject, and that is bigger than business and money. It's actually deep in the heart. So I'm going to ask all of you to think about this. When did you guys fall in love with wildlife? I'm assuming everyone here loves wildlife, right? Is there anyone who hates wildlife? Anyone? Okay, good, got that clear. Okay, everyone think back. The earliest moment that you knew you loved wildlife. What was that moment? I want to know how old you were. Where you were. Was it something you read, you saw, you watched? Some person, some place, some species? But let's start with age. How many of you were younger than 10 when you fell in love with wildlife? Wow, that's about half of the room. How many of you were above 10, below 20? Okay, much smaller number. How many of you are older than 20? All right, a small number. So most people were quite young, younger than 10. And I think that's really important. And let me ask, and you can just shout it out. How many of you, or arms again, how many of you fell in love with wildlife because of something you watched on TV? Or watched on a video or documentary? Oh, only one. Okay. Sorry? Okay, she thinks it's not true. Okay, well, let's just leave it at that. So how many of you, it was because you went somewhere and you met wild animals? Okay, so most people. It was you actually went somewhere and you had an experience with wild animals. This is really important. I think it's a very, very important thing. How many was it an interaction with a person? Okay, a few people. So I fell in love with wildlife at a very, very early age. I was 5. And I'm going to tell you this story because I don't do wildlife conservation because it gives me money or because it's a business enterprise and all that stuff that we keep saying, that people will look after wildlife because of money. I don't believe that that is the most important factor. I think it's about passion. I think it's about heart. And I think it's about common sense as well. I was 5 years old, and I was walking home with my brother. We lived in a suburb of Nairobi. We were looking up in a tree, and there was this hyrax. We didn't know what a hyrax was. We were kids. I think I was 5, he was 6. And Richard Leakey happened to be driving by, and he stopped his car, rolled down his window, and he said, "What are you kids doing?" I said, "Oh, there's this animal up there in the tree, big furry thing." And he said, he told us it's a hyrax. And he said, "Are you going to shoot it?" Okay, I was only 5, but I knew that there was something very wrong with this picture, that he thought we were going to kill this animal. My brother had a catapult in his hand. And Richard Leakey told us, don't shoot it. It's amazing animals related to elephants. And I remember going home, and then I started reading about animals, and we spent my entire childhood catching snakes and lizards and birds and mice and taking them to Richard Leakey, and he would tell us what these animals were. So a big part of my passion came from the fact that I had somebody that I could go to who knew so much about these animals that they weren't just, I don't know, you know how you see people and they see some insect and they are scared and they kill it? It wasn't like that for us. We had this person we could go to and we could say, what is this animal? Where does it live? And what does it do? And what does it eat? And it was such an adventure. Every single day was an adventure in wildlife. My big passion, as Serge says, is elephants. I adore elephants. They are more to me than, I don't know, just a lump of meat walking about on the savannah. These animals are like human beings. Kenya has the longest running research on elephants anywhere in the world. They live in families. They are ruled by women, the females, the matriarchs. They speak in their own language, and they can speak over vast distances. They have the world's longest nose, and they can smell the environment and create a picture about the environment, and they can remember it for decades because they've got a giant brain that is many times bigger than ours. And the way that their brain is structured is so complex that we will probably never unveil all of their amazing secrets. They will always be a mysterious creature to us. And when you go to Amboseli, you can get very close to the elephants. And you get a sense that they are aware of you. They can read you. They're not trying to kill you. They are just being themselves and engaging with you. And one of the most extraordinary things about elephants is this ability that they have to understand us, like they can scan us. I've been working in Amboseli area with the communities for quite some years, and I teach my undergraduate students from Princeton. Last year, the students wanted to talk to the community about their experiences with elephants. And so they spoke to a family, and they said that their best experience with an elephant was when the wife of this man was pregnant. Her waters had broken. She was in labor. She had to go to hospital, but their village was miles away from the hospital. So they had gone on foot to get to this hospital, walking through the bush. On their way, dusk falls, it's getting dark, and this huge elephant is on the path. And this elephant charges. And the man abandons his wife and runs back to the village. He left her out there. And he didn't sleep that night because he was so terrified. He called all the men. He said, we've got to go, first light, we've got to go and look for her. Because in his mind, yeah, they're going to have to bury her now. Right? They just got to go find her body and bury her. And they get back to the place. She's there. Her baby's been born. And the elephant is still there. And that was, when I was told this story, I was like, okay. They said not only was the elephant there, but the woman said the elephant stood guard over her and kept lions and hyenas away. And I was like, it sounds like a story, but actually, and I said, when did this happen? Long time ago? And they were like, no, it happened just 2 years ago. So, thank you. I don't know what I'm doing, but okay. Anyway, so it had happened just 2 years ago. So I really get this feeling that here's an animal, when left on its own, and when not harassed, shot, killed, babies being taken from families, they are a species that can actually be incredibly compassionate to other species. But just like human beings, if we went into families and ripped out the big adult males and killed all the adult females and stole the babies, we would be left with these, very disturbed families. They would be angry, nervous, anxious, aggressive, delinquent. We know that. So why does it surprise us that elephants in places where they are being killed, hunted, culled, whatever, they are different kinds of animals. They aren't really the elephants we know as we know them in Kenya, where they live in family groups that know each other. They know each other as individuals. It's almost like they have names for each other. Nick Brandt, a British photographer, has famously photographed the elephants of Amboseli, and this is the QB family. Kumquat was the matriarch. In Amboseli, every single elephant is known by name, and all the families are named after letters of the alphabet. Kumquat, her daughter Quay. Underneath Quay is her grandson Q-Tip. There's only so many names with Q, right? Quintilla and Kwanzaa. So Kwanzaa is the baby. This is a place in the world where you can get so close to these animals and see them just being absolutely natural. In fact, they are just meters away from Nick, who I think was lying on the ground taking his photographs. Kwanzaa was only 2 weeks old when her mother is letting the photographer get this close. Well, the day after that photograph was taken, Kumquat and the entire family was gunned down. Only Kwanzaa, who had no tusks, was spared. She was found 4 days later, standing next to her dead aunt, and ended up being rescued and taken by the David Sheldrick Trust. Not just females, this is in Masai Mara, around the same time, 2012. Bulls that live in large groups. So bulls leave the family at the age of about 13 or 14. They go out and about as bulls, and they are very vulnerable. When one is killed, elephants are like humans. They try to go and help. But these guys actually were probably standing in complete, shock and horror. Puts them in even more jeopardy. In 2009, the CITES Convention made a decision based on requests from several countries to allow a one-off sale of ivory from Africa, from 4 countries, to China and Japan. It was said that that money would help elephant conservation. At that time, what we saw immediately in Kenya was an uptick in poaching. And we decided we're not going to let this happen. We're not going to let them get away with killing our elephants. We launched a campaign, Hands Off Our Elephants. And this campaign was basically Kenyans getting together and saying, these are our elephants, and we are going to defend them, so get your hands off our elephants. This is the QB family. You can see baby Kwanzaa and Kumquat. So what we went out to uncover was, what was the reason that Kenya was really where this poaching had started? I don't know if you guys remember, back in 2012, 2013, the poaching really erupted in Kenya. The port of Mombasa was like a funnel for ivory leaving the continent. We wanted to know what was happening, why Kenya, and how can we turn this around? So we launched a campaign with some really simple processes. First, we had to investigate. And we didn't go onto the ground to look at the poaching itself. There were so many organizations in Kenya doing anti-poaching. millions of dollars going into anti-poaching. But yet the problem was still there, so we went to investigate. And we started with the judiciary. We went into the courtrooms. We went into every single registry in every single court in Kenya to see how wildlife trials were being handled. I hired a bunch of university graduates from the School of Law to help me with this work. So they gathered data. They went into courtrooms themselves, and they sat through trials and recorded what was happening. They went to the scenes of crime and documented images like this of ivory that was being seized in the port of Mombasa. In some courts, we even put cameras into the courtroom itself and filmed the proceedings of these trials. And the findings are fascinating. First, there were a lot of people getting arrested, over 2,000 per year. But only 743 cases got into the court process that there were actually trials. 70% of the case files were missing or lost. This is corruption. It's not that they're disorganized courts. It's that you can pay somebody in the registry to misplace your files or lose them or burn them or whatever. Many offenders were actually being processed in different courts as first-time offenders, which means that many of the penalties are much lower. So if you're caught in Nairobi on one crime and in Mombasa for a different crime, you're treated as if you're a first-time offender in both courts. So we took those findings and we went straight to the press. I was put into the newsrooms talking with our friends from the Kenya Wildlife Service. They didn't like this. We were exposing that there was a big problem, that we were failing to properly process and prosecute these criminals. And we went out to get friends and champions for our cause. I'm a mixed-race Kenyan. There are lots of people in Kenya who look at me and think I'm weird. Am I from Ethiopia? Am I from the Caribbean? You know, they don't actually, many people don't see me as a fellow Kenyan. So we had to find Kenyan champions. And Giuliani, he's a hip-hop artist from a place called Dandora. He came with us into the field. He's super famous in Kenya. And he said to me after the first time he ever saw an elephant was with us in Amboseli. The first elephant he saw was a young bull called Grandis, 21 years old. Nothing amazing about this bull. But Giuliani fell in love with that elephant. And he said, I'm going to write a song about this elephant. And there is a song, an amazing song he's written about Grandis. We went to the industries and we actually asked them to help us with the campaign. Safari Link, one of the bigger local airlines, have branded all their aircraft with a campaign message. So no matter whoever you are coming into Kenya, going on local flights, you're going to see this message about hands off our elephants. But the most important and powerful person that we involved in this campaign was the First Lady. Margaret Kenyatta is the only First Lady in the world who has gotten involved in a conservation campaign of this kind. So she's the patron of the Hands Off Our Elephants campaign. Like so many Kenyans, when we invited her to do this, I asked her, how much do you know about elephants? And she was like, oh, almost nothing. The last time she'd seen an elephant was when she was 5. So we had to do like serious elephant behavior and ecology 101, taking her into the field to learn a lot about elephants. We went into schools, talked to young people. We went into communities. We spoke to large groups of people about the challenge. And then we launched an announcement that Kenya was facing a crisis. We actually stated that we had an emergency with our elephants. Normally, the citizens of Kenya can't do this. People say to me, you can't declare that there's a national crisis. And I said, I can. I'm a Kenyan. I can do whatever I like. So we called the media and we said, we're going to declare that there's a national crisis. We took the Kenya largest currency note, 1,000 shillings, and we killed all the elephants that are on that note. And we said, this crisis of poaching in Kenya is going to destroy the economy. And I went to the chief of police. So we asked Kenyans to sign a petition. The petition was to help the police to arrest a certain criminal whose name is Faisal Mohammed Ali. He was involved in the seizure of 2,000 kilograms of ivory in Mombasa. this was a really important moment when we realized what we were up against. Because until then, we were getting a lot of support. I was sitting in his waiting room for 8 hours. And his secretary kept telling me, oh, he'll be with you in a minute, he'll be with you in a minute. And finally, after 8 hours, I thought, there's something really suspicious going on here. So I went to his desk, and I saw one of his guests leave, and I put my foot in the door. You know those government offices where the doors slam, like there's a magnetic thing, and they close and they lock? So I put my foot in. I had come with a huge crew of media because we were going to hand over this petition. And the petition was actually a promise to pay $1,000 to whoever helped us catch Faisal. So as far as we were concerned, we were doing a really good thing, and he'd be really happy with us. So I put my foot in the doorway, pushed the door open, and walked in. All of the national media had left. They weren't going to wait 8 hours. So I had my one camera woman with me. And the chief of police, his name is David Kimayo, he looked at me and said, "What are you doing in my office?" I said, "But you invited me for a meeting." And he said, "But that was 8 hours ago." I said, "Yeah, but I've been waiting." And he said, "What's all this about?" And so I showed him our petition. It was World Elephant Day, so we had these posters to give to him. And he took my petition, which had 400 signatures from CEOs of Kenyan companies. He took my petition and he threw it on the floor. And he said, "You people, you are the poachers. You are the guys. We know that you are the ones. We're investigating you because you're the ones going out there killing the elephants." And then he said, and I'm done. And he walked out of his own office. He just literally stormed out of his own office, left me standing there. And it was a very weird moment for us. So I made a quick statement to camera and sent it to the newsroom. We'd recorded the whole thing. He lasted about 2 more months in government, and then he was removed from that position. So it was interesting. What we're seeing in some parts of Africa today is a similar kind of behavior. We see these things happening again and again. No country wants to admit that there's a problem of poaching. Every country wants to deny that some things can go out of control. That particular moment, I think, is when Kenyans realized that things were much more serious than they thought. We then mobilized thousands of people to march in the streets of Nairobi demanding justice for wildlife. This was one of the first global marches in Nairobi. We took our report and we lobbied the government. We went to the Director of Public Prosecutions. We got them to rethink the whole standard operating procedures for dealing with criminals, the way that the files are kept in the courtrooms. We trained people, not just prosecutors, but scene of crime officers, judiciary, judges, and magistrates. And then we went to train the communities as well, because the law was changed, and what we had was new rights and rules for everyone. So we went to the communities to teach them. So what happened? After 2 years of the new law being enacted, we went back to the courtrooms, and what we found was really amazing. So the new legislation was having a huge impact. People were going to jail. There were even some of the traffickers were going to jail. Faisal got arrested, prosecuted, convicted, and jailed for 20 years and fined $200,000. Poaching dropped way back down to the original levels. So this was a huge success. We were thrilled. We burned our ivory in a big celebration, and we continued monitoring the progress of these reports. Just when we thought that everything was okay, that our elephants are safe, this animal called trade in ivory is coming back again. CITES this year, there are 5 countries that want to reopen trade in ivory. Elephants have had a 10-year break. That's it, 10 years. That's 1/8 of their lifetime, and we want to reopen ivory trade. And somebody thought it was a good idea to give away elephant footstools during a conference that was really probably the best thing that could have happened here in Southern Africa. But instead, changed the headline. Botswana gives leaders elephant footstools. What's really sad and tragic about this is we keep doing this. Every CITES convention, we go round and round in circles. It's very painful. And the amazing thing is that actually there's far more agreement between the different countries. We all want elephants to be safe. We all want economic return from elephants. We all know that elephants play a very important role in our ecosystems. We all want to end human-wildlife conflict. We all want to stop illegal crime. We all need more funds. But there's one little thing that we don't agree on, and that is whether hunting and culling and sale of ivory is going to help us solve the other problems. So it's really great to be here to talk about this, because there are people in the room who are from different parts of the world. And I think that earlier on, the discussion that should have led to a blood splatter on the drawing, I don't see it yet, but or at least a tug of war. It's okay to disagree on big issues. It's okay to even argue about it. I don't think we should shut down conversations because they're difficult conversations to have. In Kenya, we screwed up. We let this monster out again. He's back on the streets. And it's not just elephants. I think elephants are a big issue. But we're losing sight of what's really happening around the world. 1 million species at risk of extinction. And here in Africa, we're going to see the worst of it. Nairobi National Park is now home to wildlife and a railway right across the park. The only good news about this railway is that it was elevated because of pressure from conservation groups. We're seeing an increase in human-wildlife conflict as people and wildlife become into closer contact. And our headlines in Kenya are not tourism is booming or elephant has another baby. Our headlines are elephants killed somebody. And the victims, the people who are worst affected, the people that we struggle to help, are mostly women and children, like in Kini, who were tossed by an elephant near Amboseli. The message that we're sending to Africans is a message that we have to turn around. This was a lioness killed right next to Nairobi National Park after she had attacked some goats. The schools in the local area were closed down so that these children could see their first lion. This is the tragedy of the messaging and the narrative that our young people in Africa are getting. And then there are so many great positive stories. Richard Turere. This little boy, age 13, is an inventor who came up with an incredible gadget, flashing lights, to keep lions out of his father's homestead. That idea got him to the TED stage in Los Angeles at the age of 13. Today, he is actually at ALU, working on his own leadership to become a conservationist in Africa. We need more Richard Tureres. So part of the work that we've been doing is figuring out, how do we do that? How do we create an army of conservationists or an army of wildlife warriors? Oh, and this is where I do something that Fred, I don't know, where's Fred? So we've been trying to find out what is going on with our people. Why can't we save our wildlife? Why are we so passive in some ways? So we went and we did surveys, national surveys, using Ipsos as an independent organization to survey the entire country. We wanted to know, what do people actually know about wildlife? Because all these decisions are being made on their behalf, but what do they really know? Most people say they know something. 16% say they know a great deal, but 33% say they know nothing at all about wildlife, which is very shocking. So we asked Kenyans, they said they know something. How many parks or protected areas can you name? Only 30% of Kenyans said that they could name 3 parks. Only 10% could name 5. Kenya has 54 parks and reserves. We have dozens of forests and 160 conservancies. You know, the protected landscape of Kenya is, I think it's about 15% of the land of the country is protected, and Kenyans don't even know that these conservation areas exist. So we asked Kenyans, what is the main benefit of wildlife? They said tourism, 75%. I'm not surprised, because that's what we tell kids every day in school. Why do we want wildlife? Why do we need our protected areas? Is for tourism. 4% said national pride and heritage. And they said that. I don't even know why they said that, actually, because it's not taught in school. A very small percent said they enjoy visiting the parks. Some said education, 4%. 8% said there's no benefit of protected areas. So, as an organization, as WildlifeDirect, we are trying to change this. It's not just for Kenya, I think it's important across the entire continent. How do we change hearts and minds of our people and our laws so that our wildlife will endure forever? And we came up with this idea that really what we need to do is to connect people to wildlife so that they'll value it and act to save it. Just the way that all of you are connected to wildlife. Some experience, some place you went, something you saw, some animal you interacted with. That is what got you grounded in conservation. So we went to find out, so how do people learn about wildlife? 74% of Kenyans watch television. It's quite high. It's not. It's almost as high as USA, 75%. So this is huge. This is Kenya. I don't know what the statistics are like for other parts of Africa. 4.5 million people watch free-to-air. Only 10% of that watch cable. This is really important. The reason why England just declared a national climate emergency, and so did Ireland, has a lot to do with what they're watching on television. David Attenborough's films, which have made across the world, and many of them in Africa, are actually not available to the ordinary Africans. And I've been trying to get BBC to let us show these things in Kenya, and they're so stubborn, but it makes no sense. It's one of those irritating things that we have to shift. A lot of Kenyans have mobile phones, about 83%, and many people use them for the internet, but the main thing they're doing on the internet is WhatsApp, Facebook, and Twitter. So one of the first things I did was to go to BBC and Nat Geo, Discovery, and many other organizations said, give us your films. We want to show them on national TV. I negotiated a slot on national TV to show these films. I got about 100 hours of films. The ones from BBC and Nat Geo mostly were very old, but thanks to Derek and Beverly, Joubert, who are here, thanks to Mark and Vicky Dieblestone, and also thanks to Alan Root, I got a lot of amazing footage, local content from Kenya that we could broadcast in Kenya. And we started broadcasting these films every week. What was amazing was that within 2 or 3 episodes, Kenyans were saying, where are the Kenyans? Where are the Africans? Why aren't we seeing ourselves doing research or narrating these stories? So we cobbled together our own show. We called it NTV Wild Talk. And our first episode was with Jonathan Scott. We found this phenomenal woman called Smriti Vidyarthi. She's a news anchor in Kenya, very famous. She doesn't know anything about animals. We persuaded her to be the host of this show. It was a discussion program, but she was amazing. She would do anything we said, except, she told me, no snakes, no rats, no cats, no birds, no bats. So it was a little bit difficult. She was terrified of animals, actually. She was really terrified. You can see it. It took a whole day to film her holding that snake. She was absolutely, what would I say? She couldn't move, actually, paralyzed with fear. But it was perfect, because that's what most Kenyans actually experience. They don't know these animals, so when they see her interacting with them, they get it for themselves, because she's just like most people. After 2 years of running our series, we made 65 episodes. We did another survey, and we found that 34% of Kenyans said that they're learning about wildlife from television, which was great. Only, let's see, where is it? Schools, where are schools here? Schools, 7%. Only 7% of Kenyans learn about wildlife in schools. Radios, they said 12%. We asked which films they were watching, and our show came up at 29%, compared to Nat Geo Wild, 15%. So we knew that this show was making a difference. So we asked if they'd actually seen our show, NTV Wild Talk, with the Indian lady, Smriti Vidyarthi. We had to say it that way. 20% of Kenyans had seen our show after 2 years. And 44% of people in the city of Nairobi had seen the show. So that was really amazing. We were reaching large audiences. We asked Kenyans if they would volunteer for wildlife, because that was our whole theory of change. You'll fall in love with it, you'll want to volunteer, you're going to help us. 48% of Kenyans said they would volunteer for wildlife. And we see this every day in Kenya. When we call for the Global March for Elephants, Lions, and other endangered species, we get extraordinary crowds of people. About 4,000 people marched for 15 kilometers on these concrete roads of ours, just to be part of a movement about wildlife, which I thought was amazing. When we did the Global March, which was just a few weeks ago, at the very end, we had the Minister for Tourism and Wildlife. He was our chief guest, and I got to speak just before him. And I thought I would make a point to him that some of the species that we're trying to save, we've never seen, like pangolins. Most Kenyans don't even know what a pangolin is. So I thought I'd start with an animal we all know, rhinos, and then I would get to pangolins. So I said, the whole audience, all these thousands of people, how many people have seen a black rhino? And I asked them to put their hands up. And we literally had about 5 people. The Kenya Wildlife Service headquarters is at the doorstep of one of the biggest rhino sanctuaries in the world, the Nairobi National Park. And yet, all these people I was walking with, most of them very young, had never seen a black rhino. And I never got to talk about pangolins. I just stopped there and I said to the minister, you've got to do something. How can we have this huge group of people in Nairobi? I've never seen a black rhino. And I said, please let them go to the park for free tomorrow. So he declared, it's free for everyone tomorrow. It ran on the news. National Park is open, free for everybody. The following day, 15,000 people tried to cram into the park on that day. It was extraordinary to see so many people wanted to come to the park. It woke them up that there is enormous, enormous amount of interest. After making the NTV Wild series and realizing just how powerful it was, we decided to try something slightly different. That show was directed at policymakers. It was made by a TV station in very low resolution, and we wanted something that could really travel to other parts of Africa. So we came up with a new idea, Wildlife Warriors, which is a new TV series. It's just been launched. We're on our 5th episode. And I'm going to show you a few clips. Each of them are very short. For most people, seeing wild dogs is a dream of a lifetime.
The only way I can differentiate between these two individuals, born on the same day, same sex, and born by the same mom, is using this small white unique spot.
Last night, they only got a small prey, so they're hungry, they're out hunting, they're running. They are a phenomenal species. They can run so fast, and they can disappear instantly.
The domestic dogs created an outbreak, the canine distemper outbreak. That thing killed all these packs within a span of 2 months. But one day, I had this rare beep from a dog. Beep, beep. Amazingly, there's a single individual, a female adult, who had survived this outbreak.
There's a hyena. There's a hyena following them. This is very typical of what happens with wild dogs. They're such efficient killers that other predators that are more like scavengers, like hyenas, will actually follow behind them in order to get some of their food off them. The radio collar is just being put on this female. She's been down for about 25 minutes now. We only have about 10 more minutes to go.
Mbwa zikikuja hapa, zikuje ziingie hapa kwa hiki kijijini, watu watafanya nini?
Sisi tawa kama anaingia hapa na kuja kukula mali, naweka supu kuki.
These people live together with all the wildlife and of course all their livestock. It's quite heartbreaking to see what life must be like for them. They've said that if the Suyan, or the wild dog, comes into this corral for their goats and sheep, they could lose up to 20 animals in just 10 minutes.
The simplest expression to what I do is that it's amazing, exciting, and of course interesting. So right now, we are talking of a population of 10 wild dogs in Laikipia. We are confident, and we'll do what we can to ensure that the population is growing up again. The only park in Laikipia, it's called Phoenix Park.
So that was our first episode. I'm going to show you a couple more. They're much shorter. That's just the promo. Thank you. Oh, sorry. This is no.
My name is Ian Lemayan, and I'm a wildlife warrior.
When I was born, there were over 25,000 of these animals. Today, there are fewer than 1,000.
Why should we watch the extinction of an animal that was there before us? Shouldn't we be feeling so guilty trying to finish a species that has existed over these years? We need them for ourselves. We need them for them to be them. We need to see them grow.
This is Wildlife Warriors, and I'm Paula Kahumbu. So the next slide, I don't know where it came from. It's not my slide.
What?
So I don't know what that was. I checked my slides. So Wildlife Warriors is an adventure. I came up with this idea together with a team of very creative people in Kenya that the narrative has to change. If our young people are to become wildlife warriors, are to be active in a productive way in conservation, we've got to educate them, and we've got to show them people that they can relate to. So this was really important. It's a 13-part series. Every episode has a hero. For example, Fikiri, who has rescued thousands of turtles. But actually, Kenyans have never heard of him. But when you see him out there working with the communities, speaking local languages, saving baby turtles, doing science, it's so compelling. I have people telling me, I'm not elephants anymore. I'm now a wild dog person. I'm now a turtle person. It's really amazing, the reactions that we're getting from people. And what we want to see it translate into is innovations. People taking what they've learned and doing stuff. Like on the right there, we have a team that has developed some new gadgets to keep elephants out of farms. We're featuring very young Kenyans who are new in conservation, like Brenda, who studies the vulturine guinea fowl. When I told my crew we're going to do this film about a bird, they were just like, that's ridiculous. Nobody's going to watch a guinea fowl. It's such a common bird, and it's just a noisy animal. Actually, this is the first research on this species ever in the world. And this young lady is leading that research. So it's really super exciting that we have these young people doing stuff. They're very quiet, they're very shy, they don't have massive profiles, but through the series, they're getting noticed, they're getting funding, they're getting support, they're getting recognition. Every episode also touches on community, as you saw with the wild dog one. We go out to the communities that are affected by these animals, and we want Kenyans to fall in love with our culture, our tradition, our ancient relationship with these animals. And it's extraordinary, the stories that we get. It allows us we're making half-hour episodes, but actually there is so much more content and opportunity to use the content. Many of our heroes are women, and our crew is entirely Kenyan. We are doing a lot of work actually on women and women empowerment. And these guys are amazing. I have 2 cameramen and 1 sound guy. None of them had ever worked on wildlife before. In fact, I think we're the only African crew working on wildlife. It was very hard to find anybody who'd be willing to do this kind of work. I have to say, the cameras were abandoned several times on the snake shoot. I would literally turn around and they were gone, and the camera was lying there. So for them, it was a very steep learning curve. And they have been absolutely spectacular. In fact, through this job, they have now got jobs on wildlife productions for other organizations. So Laban, Steve, and Evode, incredible guys. And through our work, the communities are coming back to us and saying, you know, it's not just about animals. What about our culture, our religion, our sacred ceremonies? And they want us to actually document elements of their lives that have been forgotten and are at risk of disappearing completely. especially, and somebody mentioned this to me earlier, the stories that the elders hold. When we did an episode in Samburu, we got stuck. We went with completely the wrong vehicle, and we got stuck in the sand, and we had to camp out in the wild. And a young man invited us to come into his home and camp in his home so that at least we were safe and we had water and toilets. And then the next night, he brought the elder over to talk to us. And the elder, they lit a little fire, and we sat around the fire. And the elder told us all the stories about the stars. And I didn't even know that our local Samburu people had elders who could read the galaxies. And they have stories about them. And they can read the weather patterns in them. And it was just unbelievable. So we've been invited back again to record weddings. This was a particular part of it. And what's interesting is we often think of communities as these poor people, barefoot, struggling, we have this image that we keep painting about them. These guys are proud and rich in their heritage. And they were so excited to share with us what they're doing. So for us, I felt so humbled that they were inviting us to come and participate and record those stories. One of the most exciting things about changing the narrative and saying, you know what, it's our narrative, we're going to own it, we're going to tell our stories, and we're going to tell them to ourselves and our people, because we need to own those stories. We need to own the responsibility of dealing with the crisis that our wildlife is facing. One of the outcomes has been getting recognized with other crews. So PBS are just about to launch a new, very big documentary called When Whales Walked on Land. It's a new series, 4-part series, which is going to be on PBS. It has several animals. One of them is elephants, and they chose me for that. So it's really great to go from being on local television to actually getting a chance for the first time to appear in a major international documentary. Sorry, I just want to go back and say, so our TV series is funded entirely by USAID, Department of Interior, the Wildlife Foundation, which is a Seattle-based organization, and National Geographic paid for one of our episodes. We couldn't get a single African company to support the production of this series. And we went through the tourism, through the ministry, through the Association of Tour Operators, through, you name it. I would have thought that the tour companies would be really excited about it. But maybe it's just early days. So one of the most exciting things about our TV series is that it's not just a TV series. These are half-hour episodes. They are broadcast at 5 p.m. on Citizen TV, the largest TV channel in Kenya. It reaches 30% of the public. The really exciting thing is that we're taking this directly into classrooms. And this was always the idea, that television is great, but once you've watched the show, it's gone. Actually, how do we now embed those lessons and take them further in classrooms? So we have gone to children with lessons, workbooks, lesson plans, teachers' guides. We train teachers and we train children, and we take them out of the classroom and into the wild. And we're doing this because of something that the communities told us themselves. We've done a lot of workshops with communities. This was the biggest one we ever did. 750 people from the local community came to a meeting to discuss the improvement of their school. Children got to participate equally with the adults and the elders and even the governor. Everybody got to participate equally. And the children went away and huddled in a classroom, and they had their own little discussions, a bit like the discussions we had today. And they sat there for the whole day having a conversation. And then they said what they wanted, the number one priority for these children was a school bus. And we were just like, these children are hungry and they don't have books. And, how is this school bus going to help them? So they drew this picture for us. They just want to go into the national park. And this was so exciting for us to see that these young kids got it. They live very close to the national park, but they've never had a chance to go into the park and experience wildlife in a really decent way. So we started a program. The Wildlife Warriors Clubs in schools takes children out into the park to see animals. Many for the first time. We take children from Amboseli to the coast to see dolphins. We bring children from the coast to Amboseli to see elephants. We get them to do science. So they told us they don't want to do pretend science, and they don't want to just drive around, they want to do real science. They want to contribute to the national database on these animals. So we work with GPS-enabled cameras to take photographs of zebra, which are put into a software that allows us to read the stripes of every zebra, and in that way, count them. So the Grevy's zebra, the most endangered zebra in the world, is being counted by children. Thank you. And every school that we work with, there are now 36 of them in all the different corners of the country, and a project supported by the Safaricom company. They're all doing projects because they're competing. And when I first heard about the amount of activity going on, I was a little bit surprised. Wow, these kids are working super hard. Why? Because the prize is to go camping for 4 days. So it's really exciting that a little project, the film series, going into classrooms has translated into children doing amazing activities. There are some kids who are making elephant dung paper. Others are cleaning the beaches in Lamu. It's really, really super exciting. So before I close, I just wanted to say that, I know I started off saying that it is so depressing. There are so many things that bring you down, and people always say to me, Paula, how do you get up in the morning? How do you keep going? Well, it's stuff like this. It's working on these exciting projects with these incredible, phenomenal, passionate people who care about nature, who aren't in it just for the money. They're in it because they really love these animals. And so I'd like to invite you all to think about going onto our website on YouTube, watch the show. There are 5 episodes that have been downloaded. They are uploaded. Each of them is only 26 minutes. You can share it with your friends. Any company here that wants to sponsor an episode, I'd really wish you would do so, because I want to get out of Kenya and start making episodes in all of Africa, so that it is not just a film about wildlife warriors in Kenya, but wildlife warriors across the continent. And I want us to talk about animals that migrate, like birds and whales. So anybody who's interested in sponsoring an episode, I'd love to talk to you. And if you're interested in the kids part of it, so this is about creating clubs in the schools, getting kids out of classrooms into the national parks with trained teachers and books. I'd also love to chat to you about that as well. So finally, I have put up all of our major donors, and the ones in red are the donors who are from Kenya. One of our biggest indicators, maybe one of our metrics that we like to use at WildlifeDirect, is to show that we are not just appealing to Western foreign donors, that actually a lot of Kenyan donors are also supporting us. And the Amarula Trust here in South Africa is one of our major supporters. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Would you mind taking some questions?
Sure, absolutely.
So if there is any question in the audience.
Yeah.
When you say you'd love to have a company sponsoring, what sort of range of money do you talk about? One episode?
So one episode costs $35,000 when we're making it in Kenya, which is a fraction. I'm sure Derek and Beverly will say, because we're not making Nat Geo quality, but we're making episodes that will travel around Africa. Our goal is to get it on SABC and across the Nigerian channels as well, so that we actually get these shows across the continent. Of course, it'll be more if we have to move our crew to another country or hire crews in other countries, which is actually what I'd love to do in my next season. So $35,000 for one episode. Thank you.
Any other question? No? Oh, Zava.
You said that it was organizations in Seattle that,
Oops.
came out of nowhere, that were sponsoring. What was the feedback that you got when you went to African organizations to sponsor these episodes, that they were not interested?
It's really strange. We went to banks, insurance companies, tour companies. Everyone says that they have a CSR budget or they have a marketing budget. But most of their CSR activities are around orphans or women's health. And anything to do with nature is tree planting. I don't know what's wrong with us. We have this thing that conservation is planting trees. And so, unfortunately, that's where all the money goes. The idea of using that budget towards a television show that is going to drive people to our parks, raise the level of concern and attention to the environment, it's been a hard one to sell to African companies. But actually, there's a huge amount of visibility that will come with any company that sponsors it, because they get seen, USAID get them huge things saying, from the people of America, so they love it.
And are there any petitions or works going on that are contributing to these parks having more complimentary days that allow people access to engage with animals?
All of these things have to be pushed from the private sector. So as conservation organizations, I've tried to, we work in a collaboration. We have the Conservation Alliance of Kenya. And what I often hear is people saying, but it's not good for the parks because they want the money. But the truth is, they aren't coming anyway, so you're not getting the money anyway. It's a conversation to be had. We had a wonderful conversation earlier this afternoon, and I hope that we can actually push for open day in parks across the whole continent. I think that would be an extraordinary achievement from this Congress.
So we've got two more questions. First over here, second over here.
Paula, can you tell us more about the program bringing fifth graders into the park? What kind of numbers have you got? And is the tourism industry participating? Mm-hmm. And I will share up front my total bias for a conversation with you, which is that operators have vehicles, we've got expert guides, we've got access, we have the knowledge, we can facilitate.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a great question. So we have this
Sorry, I'm getting confused. Sorry.
Oh.
Ignore me.
Okay. So one of the things that we're lobbying for right now is to get every single fifth grader into the parks. Our minister said to me, why not all kids? And I said, well, we can try with all kids, but when we say every fifth grader, it allows us to focus on an age group and produce materials and content, and then we work with them as they progress and others come in. There are about 2 million fifth graders in Kenya. It's a huge number. I think it's like 25,000 primary schools that we're talking about. We're currently only in 36 schools, so we're testing the model, we're training the teachers. We've brought in people from England to help us with different kind of experiential learning and assessing how the children are interpreting the environment. It's actually really exciting because it matches very nicely with Kenyan's education reforms, which is that children now should not be trained to learn through rote learning, memory. They should be learning critical thinking. So this is great. So teachers are being told, be creative, find something in the environment to help you do this math class or this English class. Oh, what's better than the national parks? You can do English, you can do music, you can do languages, you can do math. There's so many great things that you can create for teachers because they aren't trained to be creative, they're trained to teach a curriculum in a certain way. So there's this great opportunity as conservationists to do this. The schools have offered their buses. So some of the elite schools have said, our buses are sitting around most of the day doing nothing. Maybe we can make those available. But it would be really amazing if the tourism industry said, you know what, we're going to also put our vehicles and make them available for this. And if it's a national program, and we've now got a national conservation education network, we can actually work together with the tourism industry. I think that would be fantastic. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, Paula, this actually isn't a question. It's just going to be a statement. Sounds bad, hey? We spoke about inspiration a little bit earlier, and I just have to say, as a journalist trying to get a message out there all the time, you are an absolute legend.
Yeah. Woo! Thank you.
And I really, really hope that you can bring this brand down south. I think it's well needed, and we could really do with somebody like you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I should mention that I've been working with 2 South Africans, Noel Koch and his wife Pragna, who run the Nature, Environment, Wildlife Film Congress, which happens in July. They are such an incredible powerhouse. They saw this project, and Noel has been chasing me, and finally we're actually collaborating. And I hope that we can actually do an interesting exchange. It may be the same series or a different series, but I think we do need to bridge Southern Africa and Eastern Africa. We've got to find ways to bridge so that we can speak to each other. Somebody said earlier, just talking in our little corners. We've got to speak to each other.
Paula, we'll produce a show with you next year.
Oh, yay! Thank you. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Derek and Beverly, really, really appreciate it. I hope everybody here knows who Derek and Beverly are. Oh,
We know.
you know them. Oh, amazing. Thank you.
One more question over here.
Yes, my name is Winnie. I come from Kenya, and I want to confirm that everything Paula says is true. She's absolutely made a phenomenal difference to the way people view wildlife because of bringing just that angle of people that the audience can relate to. Because I know that the people I teach, because I teach at university, they actually program themselves to be at home to watch Wildlife Warriors. So it's a program, it's short, they can program their time and be there for those 26 minutes to watch Wildlife Warriors. And I just want to say that we need 1,000 more Paulas if we're going to achieve what we talked about in the youth agenda. Because it's this kind of things that get a young people interested in what's going on with the wildlife. So a big up for Paula. Everything she says is true. Thank you.
Thanks, Winnie. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Is there any more question? So I think it's time to
Put my shirt back on.
thank Paula and put her shirt back on, which I'm going to have to do. Here you are. Here you are. Put this one in.
The other one is still out, inside out.
Sorry. Here you are.
All right, dressed by Serge. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you.
I'll give you another blow. Thank you so much.